Emmanuel Adetokunbo had always been a man with dreams that reached beyond the borders of his hometown in Lagos, Nigeria. At 30, he was an aspiring entrepreneur, managing a modest logistics business he had built from scratch. His charisma and drive earned him the respect of his peers, but there was one thing he longed for that his success couldn't provide: love. In the modern world of social media and dating apps, finding a partner seemed easier than ever. Emmanuel spent countless evenings scrolling through profiles, swiping left and right, hoping to find someone who shared his values and ambitions. His family often teased him about his reliance on the virtual world to find love, but Emmanuel remained undeterred. One fateful evening, while browsing through a popular social media platform, he came across the profile of Sophia Adebayo. Her radiant smile and sharp wit immediately caught his attention. Sophia claimed to be a 27-year-old fashion designer living in Accra, Ghana. Her bio was simple yet intriguing: dreamer, creator, and lover of sunsets. Curiosity piqued. Emmanuel sent her a message. "Hi Sophia, your work as a designer sounds fascinating. I'd love to hear more about it if you don't mind." To his surprise, her response came within minutes. What began as a casual conversation about fashion and travel soon evolved into hours of heartfelt exchanges. Sophia had a way with words that made Emmanuel feel seen and understood. She spoke of her struggles to establish herself in the competitive fashion industry and her dream of opening a boutique in Accra. Days turned into weeks, and their conversations became the highlight of Emmanuel's routine. They shared pictures, dreams, and even secrets. Sophia's charm was magnetic, and Emmanuel found himself falling for her despite the geographical distance. Sophia would often compliment Emmanuel's dedication and warmth. "You're such a kind soul, Emmanuel," she once said during a late-night video call. "It's rare to find someone as genuine as you in today's world." Despite their growing connection, there were occasional moments that gave Emmanuel pause. Sophia's social media presence was sparse, and her reluctance to share details about her daily life struck him as odd. Whenever he pressed for more, she would skillfully divert the conversation, leaving him questioning his instincts. Yet his heart overruled his mind. The idea of meeting Sophia in person became an obsession. One evening, as they chatted about their future, Emmanuel blurted out, "What if I come to Accra to meet you? I want to see you in person, Sophia. I think it's time." There was a momentary silence on the other end of the call. Then Sophia's voice softened. "I'd love that, Emmanuel. It would mean the world to me. But are you sure you want to go through all that trouble for me?" "Trouble?" Emmanuel laughed. "You're worth every mile." With that, the plan was set in motion. Emmanuel began saving for the trip, eager to turn their virtual connection into a real-life romance. His friends were skeptical, warning him about the risks of online relationships. But Emmanuel dismissed their concerns, convinced that Sophia was the real deal. Unbeknownst to him, the journey he was about to embark on would lead him down a path of no return. The digital connection that had filled his heart with hope would soon unravel into a chilling nightmare. Emmanuel Adetokunbo was a man of action, and once he had decided to meet Sophia in person, there was no turning back. The thought of holding her hand and looking into her eyes brought a new excitement into his life. He began planning the trip meticulously, leaving no detail to chance. The first step was securing his travel documents. Emmanuel renewed his passport, applied for a visa to Ghana, and even took the time to research the best travel routes. He chose a direct flight to Accra, ensuring he'd arrive fresh and ready for the moment he had dreamed of for months. Meanwhile, Sophia seemed equally thrilled. Their daily conversations were now filled with plans for his visit. She spoke of the places they would explore together: the bustling Makola Market, the serene Labadi Beach, and her favorite cafe tucked away in the heart of Accra. She even offered to book a hotel for him, insisting it was safer for her to handle the arrangements since she knew the city better. "Don't worry, Emmanuel," she assured him during one of their calls. "I'll make sure everything is perfect. I want this trip to be unforgettable for both of us." Her enthusiasm reassured him, silencing the doubts that occasionally crept into his mind. His friends, however, were not so easily convinced. "You're really going to travel to another country to meet someone you've never met in person?" His best friend, Tund, asked skeptically. What if she's not who she says she is? Emmanuel laughed off the concerns. Tund, not everyone on the internet is a scammer. Sophia is different. I've spoken to her for months. I've seen her on video calls. She's real. Despite Tund's warnings, Emmanuel pressed on. He wanted everything to be perfect, so he began buying gifts for Sophia. A pair of gold earrings, a bottle of her favorite perfume, and a few other thoughtful items he knew would make her smile. As the departure date drew closer, Sophia's behavior became more erratic. She started avoiding video calls and became vague about certain details, like her address and workplace. When Emmanuel asked her where they would meet upon his arrival, she gave a nonchalant answer. Don't worry, I'll send a driver to pick you up at the airport. Though a small voice in his head warned him something was off, his excitement drowned it out. She's just nervous, he told himself. Meeting in person is a big step for both of us. The day before his departure, Emmanuel packed his bags with care. He double-checked his documents, gifts, and travel itinerary. His family gave him a quiet send-off, still uneasy about the trip but supportive nonetheless. Be careful, son, his mother said, her voice tinged with worry. Not everyone has good intentions. Promise me you'll stay vigilant. I promise, Mama, Emmanuel replied, hugging her tightly. I'll be fine. When the flight finally took off, Emmanuel felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. The hours seemed to drag on as he imagined the moment he would finally meet Sophia. As the plane touched down in Accra, Emmanuel's heart raced with anticipation. He stepped off the plane, took a deep breath of the humid Ghanaian air, and smiled. This was it, the beginning of a new chapter in his life. But as he walked into the arrivals hall, scanning the crowd for Sophia's familiar face, a sense of unease crept in. Instead of Sophia, a man holding a sign with his name approached him. Welcome to Ghana, Mr. Adetokunbo, the man said with a grin. Sophia sent me to pick you up. Though Emmanuel was surprised, he tried to brush it off. She must be busy, he thought. I'll see her soon enough. The man introduced himself as Kwame, claiming to be Sophia's family friend. He wore a bright smile, but something about his demeanor felt off. Too eager, too polished, and strangely rehearsed. Don't worry, Mr. Adetokunbo. Sophia is waiting for you, Kwame said, loading Emmanuel's luggage into the trunk of a dusty, silver sedan. The drive through the bustling streets of Accra was both thrilling and disorienting. Emmanuel marveled at the colorful markets, the lively music spilling from roadside stalls, and the warm, tropical air. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Where is Sophia? Emmanuel asked as they navigated through the chaotic traffic. Kwame hesitated before answering. She's preparing dinner for you at her place. You'll meet her soon. Though the answer seemed plausible, Emmanuel couldn't help but notice the subtle avoidance in Kwame's tone. He decided not to press further, reminding himself to stay patient. After all, this was his first time meeting Sophia, and she had gone to great lengths to make him feel welcome, or so he believed. After nearly an hour of weaving through unfamiliar streets, they pulled up to a modest two-story house tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. The house was eerily quiet, with no sign of activity inside. This is it, Kwame announced, stepping out of the car. Emmanuel followed, his heart pounding with anticipation. As they approached the front door, Kwame unlocked it and gestured for Emmanuel to enter. Sophia is inside, Kwame said, smiling. The house was dimly lit, and a faint smell of mildew lingered in the air. Emmanuel stepped inside cautiously, his eyes darting around the room. The living room was sparsely furnished, with mismatched chairs and a single, flickering bulb casting long shadows on the walls. Sophia? Emmanuel called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. There was no response. She'll be here soon, Kwame said, closing the door behind him with a loud thud. The sound sent a chill down Emmanuel's spine. Something wasn't right. He turned to Kwame, whose demeanor had shifted from friendly to oddly detached. Why don't you sit down and relax? Kwame suggested, gesturing to a worn-out couch. Emmanuel hesitated but complied, setting his bag beside him. His mind raced with questions. Why wasn't Sophia here to greet him? Why hadn't she called to explain the change in plans? Minutes turned into what felt like hours as Emmanuel waited in the stifling silence. He tried calling Sophia, but her phone went straight to voicemail. When he asked Kwame for answers, the man offered vague reassurances that only deepened Emmanuel's unease. Just as Emmanuel was about to demand an explanation, the front door creaked open. Two unfamiliar men walked in, their faces hard and their eyes scanning Emmanuel like predators sizing up their prey. "Who are they?" Emmanuel asked, his voice trembling. "They're friends," Kwame replied, avoiding his gaze. The two men didn't speak. Instead, they locked the door behind them and sat across from Emmanuel, their presence suffocating. Panic began to set in. Emmanuel's instincts screamed at him to leave, but he felt trapped. The once thrilling adventure of meeting Sophia had taken a sinister turn, and he realized he might have walked into a trap. As the tension in the room thickened, Emmanuel's mind raced. What was going on? Where was Sophia? And most importantly, how could he escape? Little did he know, the nightmare was only beginning. The atmosphere in the room was suffocating, thick with tension and the faint stench of stale air. Kwame sat in a corner, fiddling with his phone, his earlier friendliness replaced by an unsettling detachment. "Sophia will be here soon, right?" Emmanuel asked, his voice trembling as he glanced around the room. The men exchanged knowing glances but said nothing. One of them, a burly man with a scar running across his left cheek, leaned forward, fixing Emmanuel with a cold, piercing stare. "Relax, brother," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "You're our guest tonight. No need to worry." The words were anything but reassuring. Emmanuel forced a smile, masking the growing fear gnawing at his insides. He reached for his phone, pretending to check the time, but one of the men quickly intervened. "No phones," the scar-faced man said, snatching it from Emmanuel's hand. "We don't want any distractions tonight." Emmanuel's pulse quickened. His lifeline to the outside world had just been taken away. He opened his mouth to protest but thought better of it. The men were clearly in control, and any attempt to resist might escalate the situation. "Where is Sophia?" Emmanuel tried again, his voice steadier this time. "She'll be here soon," Kwame interjected, not looking up from his phone. "Just sit tight." Time seemed to stretch endlessly as Emmanuel waited in the dimly lit room. The sound of muffled laughter from the two strangers only heightened his unease. Every second felt like an eternity, each passing moment a cruel reminder of how far he was from home and safety. Then, without warning, the scar-faced man stood up and walked toward the door. He opened it slightly, muttered something to someone outside, and returned to his seat. Moments later, another man entered the room, carrying a small duffel bag. "Is this him?" the newcomer asked, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. "Yeah, that's him," Kwame replied, finally setting his phone down. The newcomer unzipped the duffel bag, revealing an assortment of items: duct tape, rope, and a long gleaming knife. Emmanuel's blood ran cold as the reality of his situation began to sink in. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice cracking under the weight of his fear. No one answered. Instead, the scar-faced man and his companion stood up, advancing toward Emmanuel with predatory intent. "This isn't what I signed up for," Emmanuel shouted, rising to his feet. "I came here to meet Sophia." "Sophia?" the scar-faced man sneered. "There is no Sophia." The words hit Emmanuel like a punch to the gut. The months of heartfelt conversations, the promises, the plans, it had all been a lie. He had been lured into a trap, and now he was at their mercy. Before Emmanuel could react, the men lunged at him, pinning him to the couch. He struggled desperately, but they were too strong. The scar-faced man tied his hands behind his back while the other gagged him with a strip of duct tape. "Relax," Kwame said, his voice eerily calm. "This will all be over soon." Emmanuel's muffled cries filled the room as the men rummaged through his belongings, pulling out his wallet, phone, and the carefully chosen gifts for Sophia. They laughed as they pocketed the cash and tossed the rest aside like trash. As the night wore on, Emmanuel's mind raced, searching for a way out. He replayed every decision that had led him to this moment, every ignored warning, every dismissed red flag. Outside, the city of Accra bustled on, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding within the walls of the quiet house. And inside, Emmanuel was left to face the horrifying truth. The people he had trusted had turned his dream of love into a living hell. But the night was far from over, and the terror that awaited Emmanuel would etch itself into his memory forever. As the minutes dragged on, Emmanuel's body ached from the tightly bound restraints, and his mind was clouded with fear and disbelief. His captors spoke in low tones, occasionally laughing, as if his agony were nothing more than a sideshow. Suddenly, the door creaked open again, and another figure entered the room. This time it was a woman. For a brief, fleeting moment, Emmanuel's heart leaped with hope. Was this Sophia? Was this all just some horrible misunderstanding? The woman was beautiful, dressed in a striking red dress that clung to her figure. Her face was adorned with makeup, and she carried herself with a confidence that seemed out of place in this sinister setting. But as her cold, calculating eyes scanned the room, Emmanuel's hope quickly evaporated. "So, this is the guy?" she asked, her voice sharp and commanding. "That's him," Kwame replied, leaning casually against the wall. The woman approached Emmanuel, her heels clicking against the floor like a metronome of doom. She crouched down to his level, her painted lips curling into a smile that sent chills down his spine. "Emmanuel Adetokunbo," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "You traveled all the way here to see me, didn't you?" Emmanuel's muffled cries were the only response he could manage. His heart shattered as he realized the truth. This was Sophia, or at least, the person who had pretended to be her. "What a fool," she continued, standing up and addressing the group. "Do you know how many men fall for this? Every single time, they come running like moths to a flame. And this one," she said, gesturing toward Emmanuel, "thought he'd found love." The room erupted into cruel laughter, and Emmanuel's humiliation was complete. His desperation turned to anger as he strained against the ropes, his muffled screams growing louder. "Quiet," barked the scar-faced man, delivering a swift punch to Emmanuel's stomach. The force knocked the wind out of him, and he doubled over in pain. "Enough playing around," Sophia said, her tone shifting to businesslike efficiency. "Did you get everything?" Kwame held up Emmanuel's wallet and phone. "We got the cash and his bank cards. But we'll need the pins." Sophia turned back to Emmanuel, her smile returning. "Now, Emmanuel," she said sweetly, "I need you to cooperate. If you tell us your pins, this can all be over quickly." Emmanuel shook his head, his defiance fueled by anger and a desperate hope that somehow, someone would come to his rescue. Sophia's expression darkened. "Wrong answer." She nodded to the scar-faced man, who grabbed Emmanuel by the collar and dragged him to his feet. The next few minutes were a blur of violence and threats. The men alternated between beating him and demanding the pins to his accounts. Sophia watched from the corner, her arms crossed, as if supervising a business transaction. Despite the pain, Emmanuel refused to give in. He knew that if he complied, they would have no reason to keep him alive. His only chance of survival was to stall, to buy himself time in the hope that someone, anyone, would notice his absence. But the group was prepared for resistance. Sophia stepped forward, holding Emmanuel's phone in her hand. "You have family, don't you?" she asked, scrolling through his contacts. "Let's see, your brother, your mother, your colleagues back home. What would they think if we sent them a picture of you like this?" She held up the phone, taking a photo of Emmanuel in his bound and battered state. The flash illuminated the room for a brief moment, capturing the scene in horrifying clarity. "We'll send this to them," Sophia said, her voice icy. "And we'll tell them that if they don't pay, they'll never see you again." Emmanuel's heart sank. The ambush had turned into something far more sinister, a calculated extortion scheme designed to exploit his family's love for him. The group huddled together, discussing their next moves while Emmanuel sat in silence, his body broken but his spirit clinging to the faintest shred of hope. Unbeknownst to his captors, Emmanuel had noticed something during the chaos. A small window in the corner of the room, partially open. It was a slim chance, but it was a chance nonetheless. As the group debated their plan, Emmanuel began to shift his weight subtly, testing the strength of the ropes binding his wrists. If he could just loosen them enough, he might have a shot at escape. But time was running out, and the longer he waited, the more dangerous the situation became. The night was far from over, and the ambush was only the beginning. As the sun rose over the bustling city of Accra, life carried on as usual for its inhabitants, unaware of the horrors unfolding in the small, decrepit house on the outskirts of town. Emmanuel's disappearance had gone unnoticed, at least for now. But back in Lagos, Emmanuel's absence was already raising alarms. He had promised to call his younger brother, Tund, upon arriving in Ghana, a ritual they maintained whenever one of them traveled. When hours passed without a word from Emmanuel, Tund's unease turned to panic. Tund dialed Emmanuel's number repeatedly, each unanswered ring amplifying his fear. By the end of the day, he decided to contact their close-knit family group chat, asking if anyone had heard from Emmanuel. No, came the replies, but he's probably busy. He'll call soon. But Tund knew his brother too well. Emmanuel was a meticulous planner, and he never ignored his family's calls. Something was wrong. Desperate for answers, Tund accessed Emmanuel's social media accounts, hoping for a clue. The last update was from the day before, a photo of the airport terminal with the caption, "Next stop, Ghana." Excited to finally meet her, the message sent a chill down Tund's spine. He had always been skeptical of Emmanuel's online romance. He had voiced his concerns when Emmanuel first mentioned Sophia months earlier, warning him of the dangers of trusting strangers online. "Please tell me you didn't go alone," Tund muttered to himself, pacing the room. By the second day, Tund contacted the Nigerian embassy in Ghana to report his brother missing. The staff took note of the details and promised to escalate the matter to local authorities. In the meantime, Tund decided to take matters into his own hands. Through Emmanuel's social media messages, Tund was able to piece together the details of his brother's trip. Sophia's profile provided an address, one Emmanuel had proudly shared before his departure. Armed with this information, Tund booked a flight to Ghana, determined to find his brother. In Accra, the Ghanaian police received the report and began their investigation. The address linked to Sophia's profile led them to a quiet neighborhood, where neighbors reported suspicious activity in a specific house. "That place is trouble," one resident said. "People come and go at all hours of the night. We keep our distance." The police, now on high alert, secured a warrant to search the property. When they arrived, the house was eerily quiet. The officers moved cautiously, their weapons drawn as they entered the dilapidated building. Inside, the scene was grim. The living room was in disarray, with overturned furniture and traces of blood on the floor. In one corner, they found Emmanuel's torn shirt and other personal belongings. But Emmanuel was nowhere to be found. The discovery of the items intensified the investigation. The police quickly identified the house as a hub for criminal activities, including scams and violent robberies. The residents of the house, including Sophia and Kwame, had fled, leaving behind incriminating evidence. Fake IDs, stolen items, and a burner phone used to lure victims. The phone contained a trove of messages between Sophia and multiple victims, including Emmanuel. The exchanges revealed how the group meticulously planned their operations, targeting men from other countries who could be easily manipulated. As the investigation gained momentum, the authorities issued a public alert, warning people about the dangers of online scams. Emmanuel's case became a priority, with local media reporting on the mysterious disappearance of the Nigerian man who had traveled to Ghana for love. Meanwhile, Tund arrived in Accra, his heart heavy with worry. He visited the police station, where investigators briefed him on their findings. Seeing his brother's belongings, especially the torn shirt, brought Tund to tears. "I told him," Tund said, his voice breaking. "I told him this wasn't safe." The police assured Tund they were doing everything in their power to find Emmanuel and bring the perpetrators to justice. They deployed additional officers. to comb the city and neighboring regions, focusing on known hideouts for criminal gangs. Days turned into weeks, and the search continued. Emmanuel's case became a rallying cry for families of other missing victims, sparking conversations about the dangers of online relationships and the need for stricter laws to combat internet fraud. But for Tund, each passing day without answers was an eternity. As he retraced Emmanuel's steps, he refused to give up hope, clinging to the belief that his brother was still alive. Unbeknownst to him, Emmanuel's fate rested in a delicate balance, a race against time that would test the limits of love, loyalty, and justice. As the investigation deepened, the Ghanaian police unraveled the sinister network behind Emmanuel's disappearance. The so-called Sophia was part of a well-organized gang specializing in online romance scams. Using fake profiles, they lured unsuspecting victims with promises of love, only to trap and rob them upon arrival. Evidence from the abandoned house painted a damning picture. The group had targeted men from various countries, with Emmanuel being one of many victims. The gang's leader, known locally as Kwame the Ghost, was infamous for eluding capture, operating under layers of false identities and remote safe houses. Despite the complexity of the case, authorities were determined. They released wanted posters for Sophia, Kwame, and others involved, appealing to the public for information. Tips began pouring in, hinting at the gang's movements and hideouts. Meanwhile, Tund worked tirelessly alongside the investigators, holding on to hope despite the mounting despair. The lies that had ensnared Emmanuel were vast and cruel, but the search for truth and justice was far from over. After weeks of relentless searching, the police finally tracked down the gang in a remote hideout. A swift raid led to their capture, including Sophia and Kwame. Emmanuel, battered but alive, was found locked in a back room, his spirit broken but his will to live intact. The gang faced swift prosecution, with overwhelming evidence sealing their fate. Emmanuel's testimony, though painful, was crucial in ensuring they were brought to justice. Back home in Nigeria, Emmanuel struggled to rebuild his life. The experience left deep scars, but it also served as a cautionary tale. He used his story to warn others about the dangers of online scams, turning his pain into purpose. For Tund and the rest of the family, having Emmanuel back was a blessing. The ordeal brought them closer, serving as a reminder of the strength found in love and perseverance, even in the face of unimaginable betrayal.